Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into uh something pretty fascinating. We're talking about food, but not just what we eat, but food as a pathway to something much deeper. Like, have you ever noticed how grabbing takeout on the fly or scrolling through your phone while you eat can actually leave you feeling kind of empty?
That's a really great observation, and it kind of speaks to this disconnect we've developed from the true essence of food. It's so different from how, say, our ancestors approached food. I mean, they really saw it as this vital force, not just for physical energy, but for their spirits too.
Huh. It's pretty interesting to think about that.
Like, can you imagine a world where every meal was a conscious ritual, a chance to slow down and appreciate? That connection, I think, is what we've lost touch with.
That actually reminds me of this article I was reading. It's called How Fast Food Culture Weakens the Mind and Spirit. And, well, it's a little alarming how we've shifted from seeing food as this, almost sacred source of nourishment to just something we, I don't know, quickly consume to fuel our busy lives.
Yeah, I mean, that shift definitely comes at a cost. When we reduce food to just fuel, we weaken our connection to the experience of eating, to the source of our food, and even to each other. We kind of miss out on this vital part of what it means to be human.
So, okay, we've lost touch with the deeper meaning of food, but what are the real consequences of that? Like, what's the big deal?
Well, imagine you're always rushing through your meals, not paying attention to what you're eating, or just seeing food as something to kind of get you through the day. Doesn't that lead to this feeling of emptiness?
I guess, yeah.
Like you're craving more and more, but never feeling truly nourished. It impacts us physically, but it also affects our minds and our emotions.
Wow, I never really thought about it that way. But how do we change that? I mean, how do we reconnect with food in this deeper way? It almost feels like a pretty daunting task.
You know, it doesn't have to be overwhelming, really. It starts with just bringing awareness to the choices we make. Imagine this. You're choosing ingredients that align with your values, maybe opting for local produce or, supporting fair trade practices. And then you turn cooking into a mindful ritual, a time to connect with the ingredients, experiment with flavors, and create something nourishing with your own hands. And then finally, you share that meal with loved ones, and it turns into this opportunity for connection, for shared experience.
Okay, yeah, that actually sounds really enjoyable. It's like it's a very different picture of what mealtime looks like for a lot of us. But what about those times when, I just don't have the time or energy to cook an elaborate meal? Life gets pretty busy.
Oh, I totally get that. I mean, this isn't about being perfect or spending hours in the kitchen every day. It's about the intention, the small choices we make that bring us closer to a sense of connection with food. It could be as simple as like putting your phone away while you eat,
Right.
taking a moment to just appreciate the flavors and textures.
So it's less about overhauling my whole lifestyle and more about just shifting my mindset. I
Okay.
can get on board with that.
Yeah, it's a journey, not a race. And you might be surprised by how these small shifts can actually start to affect other parts of your life too.
This is giving me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I am curious about, well, the downsides of neglecting our relationship with food. You mentioned that it can weaken our minds and spirits. What does that even mean?
Well, think about it this way. When we're constantly outsourcing our food prep or relying on, convenience foods, we miss out on engaging with food on a deeper level. Like we're just passive consumers, not really active participants in the process of nourishing ourselves.
Right.
And I think that can lead to a sense of disconnection, not just from the food itself, but also from our own bodies and from the natural world around us.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's like losing this sense of agency over something that's so fundamental to our lives.
Exactly. And well, when we feel disconnected, I think it's easier to fall into these patterns of negativity or self-doubt. Like we lose touch with our own wisdom and intuition.
So you're saying there's a real link between neglecting our relationship with food and feeling less grounded, maybe less fulfilled? Okay, this is a lot to unpack. How do we even begin to nourish our consciousness through food? Like, are there some concrete steps we can take?
Well, one really powerful practice is mindful eating. It's about being fully aware while we eat, savoring each bite, noticing all those flavors, textures, and sensations.
Okay, that sounds simple enough, but I bet it takes a lot of practice to actually stay present during meals.
Hmm.
I know I'm definitely guilty of getting distracted by my phone or just letting my mind wander.
Absolutely. And you're right, it does take practice. It's a skill you got to cultivate. But even small moments of mindful eating can have a big impact. Another key aspect is aligning our actions with our values.
Okay, so what does that even mean? How do we do that with food?
Well, It's about making choices that reflect what's important to you. For example, if sustainability is a big value for you, you might choose to buy locally sourced produce, reduce your food waste, maybe even try growing some of your own food.
I love that idea. It's like we're expanding this idea of nourishment beyond just our physical bodies. We're nourishing the well-being of others and the planet, too.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that our choices have this ripple effect, that we can make a positive impact through our relationship with food.
We've talked a lot about individual practices, and, well, I'm curious about how we reclaim this priority of food in our lives.
Oh.
It's so easy to let it get pushed aside by everything else that's going on.
I completely agree. It's about shifting our mindset,
Yeah.
recognizing that food isn't just a chore or a necessity, but it's a source of joy, of
Hmm.
connection, and nourishment on all these different levels. So one thing to think about is making meal planning a priority. Instead of grabbing whatever's convenient, take some time each week to plan out your meals. It can really make a difference.
I know meal planning, like, it's supposed to be so helpful, but I always struggle with it. I get bored with the same recipes, and it feels like just another thing to add to my to-do list.
I get it. It doesn't have to be restrictive or boring. It can be an act of self-care, a way to nourish yourself and the people you care about, with intention. Get creative with it, explore new recipes, try different cuisines, and involve your family in the process too.
I love that. It's about making it fun and creative instead of a chore.
Yeah.
Now, what about the actual cooking part? I have to admit, sometimes after a long day, I just don't feel like it.
I hear you. But what if you approached cooking as a mindful ritual instead of a chore?
A mindful ritual. Tell me more.
Just imagine. You put on some music you love, dim the lights, you're chopping veggies, noticing the different colors and textures. You smell those aromas as they fill the kitchen. You just get lost in that creative process.
Wow, you're really painting a picture. It's like you're taking something that can feel mundane and turning it into this whole sensory experience, a way to de-stress.
Exactly. When you approach cooking with that kind of intention, well, it's an act of nourishment before you even take a bite.
Okay, you've convinced me. I love that. Now, what about actually eating the meal? We talked about mindful eating, but are there other ways to make mealtime more meaningful?
Of course. One simple way is to create a space just for eating. Put away the phone, turn off the TV, set the table, dim the lights, create an environment where you can actually slow down and savor the moment.
It's like you're creating this little sanctuary for yourself,
Yeah.
just a space to actually nourish yourself.
And if you're eating with others, really engage in conversation. Put aside any work stress. Connect
Yeah.
with the people around you. It's such a powerful opportunity to strengthen bonds. Share stories.
I love that idea. It's so easy to forget to appreciate those simple moments.
And remember, it's not about doing everything perfectly right.
Yeah.
Some days you might have this amazing mindful eating experience, and other days you're grabbing a quick bite. It's about progress, not perfection.
Right, right. Small steps.
Exactly. It's about making those small choices, those intentional choices that bring you closer to a more mindful and fulfilling relationship with food. And those choices, they can really make a difference in your overall well-being. It really is amazing, how just shifting our intention even a little can completely change our whole relationship with food.
Yeah. It's like we keep saying, food is more than just something we need to survive. It connects us to, I don't know, to so much more, to our values, to each other, even to the planet. I mean, in the first part of our deep dive, we talked about how our ancestors saw food as this vital life force, and how today, well, we've kind of lost that connection.
Yeah, and that disconnect, it can really impact us in some negative ways.
Yeah, for sure. We talked about how it can leave us feeling empty and out of touch. So where do we even begin to, reclaim that connection? How do we start nourishing ourselves on this deeper level?
Well, we touched on mindful eating earlier, and I think that's a really powerful practice. But I get it. Trying to be fully present during every meal, it can feel kind of intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, multitasking is like second nature these days.
Exactly. But remember, it's a practice. Like anything else, it takes time. You don't have to be perfect. It's more about cultivating that awareness than following some strict set of rules.
Okay, that makes me feel a bit better.
Yeah.
But can you kind of break it down for me? Like, what does that actually look like?
Of course. So let's say you're sitting down to dinner. Instead of just, I don't know, diving in while you're scrolling through your phone or thinking about your to-do list, pause for a second. Just take a few deep breaths and actually look at the food in front of you. What do you see? The colors, the textures. Really engage all your senses.
Okay, yeah, just that it already makes me feel a little more present.
Right. And then as you take a bite, really savor the flavors. How does it feel in your mouth? How does it make you feel? Chew slowly, deliberately, and notice how those tastes change. You can even put your fork down between bites.
That's such a good tip. I am so guilty of it. Like shoveling food in, sometimes I don't even taste it.
Ah,
So, okay, mindful eating is about slowing down, really being present with the food. Got it. What about that idea of, aligning our actions with our values? How does that fit in?
that's about making those conscious choices that reflect what's important to you. Let's say you're really passionate about sustainability. You might choose to buy local produce or reduce your food waste, maybe even grow some of your own food.
I've been trying to be more mindful of my food waste, but I really struggle with coming up with new ways to use leftovers.
Oh, there's so many resources out there now. Cookbooks, websites, social media groups. Like, so many people are talking about reducing food waste. You can totally find some inspiration for, using up what you already have.
Yeah, that's true. I just need to find what works for me and make it a habit. And I'm thinking about the ethical part of our food choices too. How do we make sure we're, doing the right thing?
That is so important. It's about doing the research, like finding out where your food comes from, how it was produced. You might choose to support fair trade practices or buy from companies that treat their workers well, maybe even opt for plant-based
It's
options.
like we're redefining what it means to nourish ourselves. It's not just about us, it's about everyone on the planet.
Yeah, exactly. Our choices, they have a ripple effect. We have the power to make a positive impact, and food is one way to do that.
We've talked a lot about these individual practices, but how do we make food a priority in our lives?
Yeah.
So easy to let it slip down the list when you're busy.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And it starts with that mindset shift, recognizing that food isn't just another chore on our list, but it's a source of, I don't know, of joy, of
Hmm.
connection, of nourishment on so many levels. And one thing we can do, make meal planning a priority. Like instead of just grabbing whatever, take some time each week to plan out your meals and snacks.
I know meal planning is supposed to be helpful, but I always struggle with it. It gets boring. And
Yeah.
it feels like just one more thing to add to the list.
I hear you. And it doesn't have to be restrictive or boring for that matter. Think of it as self-care. It's taking care of yourself and the people you love. So get creative. Try new recipes, different cuisines. Get your family involved.
I like that way of looking at it. Make it a fun thing, not just a chore. Now, the cooking part, I have to say, after a long day, sometimes I just don't feel like it.
I totally get it. But what if, instead of viewing cooking as just another task, you approached it as a mindful ritual?
A mindful ritual, okay? I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so imagine you put on some music that makes you happy, dim the lights, maybe you light a candle, something like that. You're chopping your veggies, you're smelling all the aromas, you're just totally present in that moment, lost in the process of creating something.
I love that. You're taking something so ordinary and turning it into this beautiful sensory experience.
Exactly. And when you bring that kind of intention to cooking, well, it becomes nourishing even before you've taken a bite.
I'm convinced. I'm totally going to try that. Okay, now, when it comes to actually eating, we've talked about mindful eating, but are there other ways to make mealtime more meaningful?
Absolutely. One way is just to create a dedicated space for eating. Put the phone away, turn off the TV,
Yeah.
set the table, dim the lights, create a little environment that encourages you to slow down and actually enjoy the moment.
It's like creating a little sanctuary just for you.
Right. And if you're eating with other people, put aside your stress and really engage in those conversations, connect. Mealtime can be such a powerful way to strengthen those bonds, share stories. It's about making memories.
I love that. It's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of life that we forget to slow down and appreciate those little moments.
And just remember, you don't have to do everything perfectly. Some days you might create this whole mindful eating experience, and other days you're grabbing a quick bite. It's okay.
It's not about perfection, it's about progress.
Exactly. It's all about making those little intentional choices that help you build this more fulfilling and mindful relationship with food. And ultimately, those small choices can make a really big difference in how you feel.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening.
Hmm.
I've always been interested in food and cooking, but I never really thought about how deeply it's connected to, well, our well-being in so many different ways.
Right. It really is amazing how food can be so much more than just something that keeps our bodies going.
Yeah. We've talked about so much in this deep dive from, I don't know, the history of food to how we've lost touch with it and what we can do to, reclaim that connection and find a way to eat that's more mindful and more fulfilling.
Yeah, we talked about that idea of food as this act of conscious living, remembering that it's not just about eating, but about, intention and connection and using our hands to create something
And
nourishing.
we talked about that idea of mindful eating, like slowing down and really paying attention to what we're eating.
We also talked about making sure that, well, our actions match up with our values, like making choices that reflect what we believe in, supporting local farmers, or cutting down on food waste, or even choosing ingredients that were sourced ethically.
And, well, we explored those practical things we can do to actually make food a priority, like planning our meals ahead of time and thinking about cooking as a mindful ritual, and even just, creating a space where we can really enjoy our meals.
I think it's been a really interesting conversation, and I hope it's encouraged you to kind of rethink your own relationship with food.
It definitely has for me. I feel like I'm walking away with this, I don't know, this renewed sense of appreciation for food and a commitment to making, well, just making more mindful choices.
That's great to hear. And remember, it's a journey. You don't have to be perfect. Just start with small steps, experiment, see what works best for you.
So as we wrap up, is there like one final thought you want to leave with our listeners?
I would say this: food is a gift. It's a source of nourishment and connection, even joy. And if you embrace it with mindfulness and gratitude and that sense of adventure, well, it will nourish you in ways you never imagined.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights.
It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to take a closer look at your own relationship with food and discover all those amazing ways it can nourish not just your body, but your mind and spirit too. Until next time, keep diving deep.